Hey beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bosisiwe Dlamini Harari, the Chemical Pathology principal. If you haven't subscribed already to my channel, may you please press the subscribe button there at the bottom and also click on the notification bell so that every time when I upload a video, you get notified. So today we are going to talk about receiving samples in a chemical pathology laboratory, because it's very important that we make sure that the sample that we receive in a laboratory, it's in a proper state, it's the correct sample, because having an incorrect sample or a sample that is deteriorated or something like that can affect the result of the patient, which can lead to incorrect treatment as well. So it's very important for the people who are doing receiving to be able to make sure that they do all these checkpoints to make sure that for analysis, the result that gets there for analysis will be the results that will be good samples that will give us proper results. So the first thing that it's usually done when a sample is received in a laboratory, it is the patient identification correlation. So what happens is that the doctor will so there will be a request form that will be written by the doctor who is requesting those tests, and then the tube as well where the sample has been drawn, or a container, will also be sent to the lab with the request form together. So now what will be done will be correlating to make sure that whatever information, the name, the surname, the ID number or the medical aid number and so on, that is on the request form, then it is the same name and the surname that will be on the tube, to make sure that we have the correct patient's sample, so that results won't be sent to an incorrect doctor for an incorrect patient. And then what happens is that then they will give allocate a lab number for the sample. So both the sample and request form will have a sticker that has the lab number, and then all the samples that will be collected based on that request form, they will have the same request number as well, representing that specific patient at that time. So that is the first thing, to correlate that data. Then the next thing, when the sample is received, that needs to be checked, it will be the patient's age and gender. These two things are very important because the reference ranges of certain tests are not the same for female, and they are also not the same for male. As well as age, even with younger kids, their reference ranges might not be the same as adults. Some tests have reference ranges for different age levels. So that's why it's very important that when we're receiving, we make sure that we check the age and we put the age on the system, because it's going to determine the reference ranges for those tests that will be requested. Another point, or another thing that they will usually check when the sample is received, you will check the test that is requested, and the test that is requested will go with the sample type, because certain tests can only be done on samples collected on certain tubes that have certain additives. So that as well, it's very important to make sure that you are receiving a sample. For example, if the doctor has requested potassium and now you receive an EDTA tube only, then you know that there's something wrong, because you cannot do potassium on an EDTA tube. Then it means there has to be a recollection that will need to take place. So that's the point number 3 and 4. And then point number 5, it will be the clinical data that is also written. Usually the doctor will write it on the request form on what's going on with the patient, the kind of medication that the patient is taking, or whether is this sample fasting or is it random as well. That it's very important, because certain medications can affect certain tests. So this will help in the interpretation of the results and treatment. So that will be the clinical data of the patient. And then another thing, it is the time of collection that needs to be taken into consideration. What time was this specimen collected, like before you received it? So because certain tests, when you do them on old samples, maybe samples that are greater than 12 hours, samples that are greater than a day or two, you find that the stability of that test starts to decrease, and then you can end up having erroneous results, or results that are not correct. So that's why that time is very important, because if the time is included there on the request form and it's been put into the LIS system, it is going to help with the interpretation as well of the results. And as well with the other tests like creatinine clearance, or the tests that those require like timed collection of urine as well, the collection time is very important, because the sample has to be collected for a period of 24 hours. So to make sure that 24 hours was really covered. So it's collection time. And another thing, it is the priority of the samples. So now we need to determine, is this sample a stat sample or a routine sample? Because a stat sample, so stat stands for short turnaround times. So if the sample it is stat, then it means you don't have to wait for other samples. As soon as you receive that specific sample, then you take it straight for analysis, because the turnaround time for stat samples is very short. But now when we talk about routine samples, then routine samples, you can say, okay, these ones I can batch them. So because the turnaround time is a little bit wider than the stat samples. Then the next thing that they will also check for, it is the transport medium. Because in a chemical pathology lab, we do have tests whereby they require that the sample must be transported on ice. For example, like ACTH. So when you receive a sample whereby ACTH is requested, so it means you need to be able to, or what you need to look for is that, is this sample placed on ice? Because if it's not placed on ice, then it means that sample needs to be rejected and a recollection needs to take place, because the results definitely will be affected and they will not represent what is happening in the patient's body. And then number 9, I can add the additives, but I think I've explained it already when I spoke about the sample type. Like with when I said potassium cannot be done on an EDTA. So you're also gonna check that is it the correct additive for that sample, because some samples you can only collect them in a certain tube that contains a certain anticoagulant. Then number 10, what as well that is required is centrifugation. So now you need to determine that for this test that is requested on this sample that I have on my hand, do I need to centrifuge the sample, like to separate the cells from the plasma, or do I need to take it for analysis as whole blood and so on? So that also needs to be taken into consideration, because some tests, once you centrifuge the sample, then you can never use it as whole blood, because the result will be affected, then a recollection needs to take place. So you need to know from the beginning so that you don't make that mistake that, okay, this one, it has to be whole blood because of this test that is requested. So I must make sure that I put it aside, and the ones that needs to be centrifuged, you put them aside, and then you will centrifuge them. So basically, this is a whole process that is taking place when samples are received in a chemical pathology lab. So all the receivers, they always have to have these points in mind to make sure that whatever result that we're going to send out to the doctor, it will be the result that is representative of that specific patient. So basically, that's it from me for today. From me to you, up until next time.